So the new update is out now on the Korean server. We can have a direct look at the actual changes on these certain skills, those buffs and nerfs announced yesterday, and I can confirm it's real. Those wand buffs are pretty insane, and I will look at some math breakdowns for Fury and Invocator. And so we can get an estimate of how impactful these buffs actually were for those two classes. This, of course, will also have a knock-on effect on other classes that use those weapons, and we can also confirm the nerfs for both the orb here, along with on temporal leap, which, as many of you pointed out, is actually more of a nerf for the orb as a healer. We get that thing automatically translated, and we can confirm they have changed the tooltip to now specifically say attack and control skills, just like they specify here. And that has a knock-on effect for if you want to use Orb as healer. You can no longer reduce the cooldown of Invincible Wall, as this is survival, Clay Salvation the same, along with Fountain of Life. And in terms of Orb skills, Distortion Veil, Restoring Constellation, and Summon Satellite. All skills you would use on Oracle, Orb and Wand Healer, and now you can no longer take advantage of that kind of crazy cooldown reduction that Temporal Leap would give you. On top of the fact Temporal Leap should no longer reduce the cooldown of itself. So you can see you use it there, and yeah, this thing is a mobility skill and is not considered thus attack or control, so the cooldown no longer gets reduced. Meaning you can use this thing far less often, and again, is not going to really help you as healer. So Orb Healer just kind of got a massive nerf in that regard. But in terms of the damage, yeah, not a whole lot. The tooltip specifies that damage boost now 8% instead of 10. Thankfully, that annoying bug on Temporal Leap, where sometimes it would just cancel because you would automatically do a basic attack, that should be fixed. And we can also confirm then the Crossbow nerf. Now again, for the average player, this has no real impact. The Korean tooltip here is not properly translated, but I can get a rough one, and you can see it does include the duration increase effect can be applied up to 100 times, just as they say in the patch notes, meaning you can only extend the duration of your debuffs, your weaken effects, by a maximum of 5 seconds. Now, this generally doesn't affect too much most classes, at least those that have enough cooldown, because you could just, yes, cast Detonation Mark again after those 8 seconds. But the main intent behind that change, as I explained in my previous video, and as the devs specify here, is to prevent the use of Detonation Mark causing issue with monster boss patterns that could be skipped when you accumulated all that damage and then applied it all at once. Some of you didn't understand, but this thing is going to effectively store 80% of all the damage you deal, and then once this thing expires, once the duration expires, it will deal that damage, that 80% of all the damage you dealt over its duration in one instance. So for example, if I deal 100 million damage over the course of a minute, and I had Detonation Mark active for that entire minute, and I never recast it because I could extend the duration through Selfless, then after that minute I could activate my Detonation Mark and instantly deal 80 million damage to the boss and just kind of break him because he's not prepared to take that much damage at one point. Yes, those values are kind of hypothetical, but in terms of a group of 12 people, they're not when you have lots of people doing that strategy. And high-end groups were doing so, as prevalent here, and breaking bosses. But now let's have a look at the result of the buffs to the staff and the wand. So to be clear here, and to show you in game, the buffs to staff was to serial firebombs. It now deals 80% against monsters instead of 60, and for focused firebombs it now has an extra 160% damage against monsters instead of 120, along with Fireball Barrage now dealing 90% damage against monsters instead of 60. As for Wand, they have actually gone and improved all the curses to now have 100% extra damage against monsters. That means double damage against monsters. So Touch of Despair now has that extra 100% against monsters. With this rough translation, you can see that's added there, and this 100% is also included in the tooltip as you see there. Yes, some of you did point out that the duration of Touch of Despair is now capped at 15 seconds, as per like some stealth nerf they made a while back, probably to hinder Furies a bit. You can no longer extend its duration above 15 seconds, and that's just it. Normally I'd be able to go to 20 seconds there instantly, or 21 seconds when I cast Witching Hour, adding 5 seconds. But yeah, Touch of Despair no longer affected by like Witching Hour. 15 seconds is the limit. And so this used to be 30 seconds, so you could effectively say this nerf is simply just going back to its original damage, which is fair on some builds, but my current Fury actually uses the normal Curse Explosion, which consumes all of your damage over time, so I wasn't really making much more use beyond 15 seconds, other than at the one point when you'd catch Witching Hour, it would be 20 seconds. So yes, a bit of a nerf, and this is restoring back that maximum potential damage it could have had, but this is then more reliable with that 100% just straight up. But this buff does also include your Corrupted Magic Circle, and not just that. We can see that here. It now also has included in the tooltip the 100%, and as per my rough translation, that's here too. 100% damage against monsters. Again, doubling its damage in PvE. Now this also has a knock-on effect to indeed affect Decaying Touch. That also has 100% damage against monsters. This is pretty huge. That means all 3 different damage over time effects from Wand now have double their original damage in PvE. It's pretty huge. There is no other extra damage over time from Wand than these 3, 2 of which you can gain through Corrupting Hit here, Touch of Despair and Decaying Touch. So you then simply have to cast Corrupting Magic Circle and you have all the damage over times. And that's what I do in Fury. What that results in is double the damage on Curse Explosion, because it is directly linked to the damage your damage over times would deal and their remaining duration. So anybody using a wand for curses in PvE should experience their damage pretty much getting doubled. Again, just from the wand abilities. So that could overall be about a 50% gain if wand skills are about half your damage. And yeah, that affects Abyssal Burst too. This is another mini explosion directly linked to your damage over times. And to even add to this further, the Tevent wand is also getting that 100% damage boost, and we can check here in game. The basic version has that extra 100% monster damage, and so does the upgraded version. Looking at some rough translations, you can see that right here. It now has that extra line, 100% damage against monsters. Same here for the regular Tevent wand. So that's again pretty crazy. Tevent wand already got a buff, dealing double damage in PvE. They will probably even buff the wand further, like they said they would do with the other Archboss weapons this October. Not within this patch then, just a later one. And it's most likely to improve these stats to make them more comparable to tier 3 weapons, like Lucian's clearly has a big advantage in terms of stats versus Tevent when you look at the attributes and all those extra stats too. So with all these buffs in mind, it's going to make Fury here significantly more powerful, over 64% more effective by my calculations, with Invocator getting over a 32% damage increase, just because of those damage buffs on Focused Firebombs, Fireball Barrage, and yeah, the 100% monster damage gain on those curses. Looking here, Wand would actually contribute more damage on Invocator than Staff will. And the calculations for Curse Explosion are right here. Your explosion will basically nearly deal double its original damage, going from here 260,000 average to 440,000. It's just huge. And that's just Invocator. Then we look at Fury, over a 64% increase. And that's because Fury pretty much just relies on those curses. Crossbow is just the support effect for the cooldown and the detonation mark to accumulate the damage you dealt with those curses. So this 100% monster damage gain on all 4 curses contributing to your explosions. I calculate it twice because one is going to be with Witching Hour having those durations increased, except for unfortunately Touch of Despair is still remaining at 15 seconds. But yeah, you're going from like an average Witching Hour explosion of like 546,000, this being when the durations are at their max, which is not usually all the time, up from just 300,000, so nearly double damage on the curse explosions. So it's kind of weird what the devs have done. They've pretty much just buffed up like Fury, Invocator, and other combos that may use Wand, and barely put any nerf to Crossbow Orb. Of course, you can also just say this is their first pass on attempting weapon balance. They'll implement these changes and they'll have a look at the data again later. And so we may end up with changes next week again. Always be careful what you invest in. Try and have it be something that you're going to enjoy. And of course, it's going to suck if your class gets a pretty big nerf and ends up not too viable. However, Throne and Liberty does have the advantage that yes, you can feasibly play every single weapon on one character. You're not class locked like you would be in other games. So even if they completely nerf your weapon combo to the ground, making it not viable, there are many ways to just switch weapons, use different ones, even if it's just one of your weapons, and you could be a lot more effective. And not every class is going to be the best in every situation. Some are better at multi-target, some are better at single target. Some are better at PvP, while others are better at PvE. Of course, in an ideal world, all of them would be balanced in all content, but without a proper damage meter, it can be rather hard to tell. Dummy tests are never truly reflective of a class's performance in real combat. But yeah, that's the entirety of the update and how I feel it's going to change things. I think Crossbow Orb is still going to remain super effective. It hasn't really been nerfed, but along will come wand builds and staff builds with those buffs, resulting in them dealing significantly more damage, which does unfortunately leave quite a few other weapons in the dust here in terms of dealing damage. Who knows what will happen with those in the near future. Maybe they get buffs too, or they expect you to play just a top few classes like Invocator, Fury, Oracle, Battle Weaver, any of those combinations that use these 4 weapons. Those are pretty much the peak performers right now in PvE. Of course, you still want a bow with the deadly marker, but in most cases that can just be the Seeker, the healer bow wand. Especially now that Oracle healer also got a pretty massive nerf, no longer being able to rely on Temporal Leap to spam shields as often. So thanks all for watching. A special thank you to all the channel members for your extra support, and we'll see you guys around.